Hospital porters, pride and dignity, stop the New World Order. Welcome to HPANWO TV, and welcome to this HPANWO TV review of Project Blue Book, Season 2, Episode 5. We're getting through them, guys, aren't we? It's amazing how much filming you can get done when you're on self-isolation. So this new episode, this episode I've just seen, Episode 5 of the second season, is kind of a follow-on from Episode 4. There's a direct story arc that links the two together, and that is the ending of the previous one. It's almost like this is another two-parter. As you remember, at the end of Episode 4, which is the one where Kelly Hopkinsville incident, when J. Allen Hynek gets home, and he's confronted by Mr. Fixer. Mr. Fixer, if you remember, was the man in black. Now, he plays a big role in Season 1. I forgot my dragon juice again. Oh, one sec. He plays a big role in Season 1. There we are. When he appears several times. Now, first of all, he's directly connected with the Hynek's plan to steal that strange alien artifact from storage. It's in a storage box in a military base, and Mr. Fixer meets Hynek in the church. There's this very strange meeting between this guy and Hynek in the church, and Fixer hands him the key. He comes across as a strangely angelic being. It's not just because he appears in the church, but he seems wise and benevolent. He's one of these sort of like calm, sort of like softly spoken kind of individuals, which is why it was such a shock when he turns up at the end of Episode 4 in Hynek's house and he pistol whips him. Yeah, so you see another side of Fixer in that particular moment. Indeed, he is a very different character in Season 2. He really is. So what happens is Mr. Fixer kidnaps Hynek. He kidnaps him. Hynek is basically knocked out after Fixer pistol whips him. And I should point, there will be spoilers. I keep reminding people that. In fact, all my reviews are aimed really at people who have seen Project Blue Book, which I think most of you have now. Everyone I talk to says, "Oh yeah, I've seen it all now." The final episode actually goes to air in North America on Tuesday, the 24th. So the series has nearly run its course anyway. So I won't complete my review by then, but I'll probably I don't know what I'm going to do because I've been making more videos, of course. So Hynek wakes up. He wakes up in a aircraft hangar where there's these aircraft and there's all these other men in black going around. And Fixer goes back to being nice, but he says to Hynek, I told you to get out of the way, because there's a second meeting where Fixer tells Hynek to get out of the way and not to keep doing what he's doing. Now, Hynek, of course, as you know, he and Quinn are still working for Project Blue Book, but they're running their own little private enterprise on the side. This is something that was revealed to them at the end of Episode 10 of Season 10. That was the Washington invasion, which Fixer predicted. How does he predict it? Well, all that becomes clear. Fixer then is seen at the end of Season 10 going to Antarctica, where there's this weird alien obelisk. It's just standing in the middle of the ice, and it's like it's glowing and there's lights all over it. It's a very, very strange scene. So anyway, Fixer allows Hynek to phone home, but he's of course listening in on the extension. And Hynek says something then, which I thought was some kind of secret code he has with Mimi. But in fact it's not, but he says something that's just so obvious, only the two of them would know, but that it's not something pre-agreed, but it's something so obviously out of the ordinary that Mimi immediately interprets it to mean something is wrong. Interestingly, someone did that to me once. I remember someone phoned me up at work. It's a long story. This is a woman I kind of had a relationship with, and she left a message for me, but we were keeping our relationship secret. So, and she worked there too. She worked at the hospital too. and she said she left a message, but the message she left was for somebody, was for a different name, and the name was the name of her daughter. Now this isn't the code we agreed beforehand, but the moment I heard that, I knew that it was her. Something similar that happened there. So then Fixer asks him about the Maury Island incident. Now this is a very interesting case. This happened actually on June the 21st, 1947. Now Kenneth Arnold sighting, I did look it up. I should know it anyway. It's UFO Day. International UFO Day, June the 24th. So this actually happened 3 days before the Kenneth Arnold sighting. So you could say this is a UFO event that predated the supposed first UFO event. And this is what the skeptics always get wrong. They say, oh, there were no UFOs before Kenneth Arnold. Yes, there were. Yes, there were. All that happened with Kenneth Arnold was the UFO phenomenon became kind of like a public meme in the media. It entered the media. They happened before then, many times. In fact, it goes back throughout human history. There are old paintings, and there's even cave paintings from thousands of years ago that show aliens and flying saucers. But what you have with the Kenneth Arnold was just kind of the beginnings of the modern UFO era, which the skeptics think just is where the whole thing was launched. And what happened in Maury Island? A guy called Harold Dahl was on a boat. He was on a boat off the Pacific Northwest of the United States, and some strange objects appeared in the sky above the boat. These were described as ring-shaped. They were like a flying saucer, but these, like, the centre was cut out, donut-shaped. And one of these craft started attacks the boat. I mean, some people have interpreted it as a crash, but it's probably more likely to be some kind of attack, because the boat was bombarded with pieces of red-hot metal and molten metal. Dahl was hit by one of these and burnt himself. His dog was hit by one and died. Now, when he got back to port and he told this story, something very odd happened. Well, firstly, a guy called Fred Chrisman investigated. He's a weird character. He was a writer about paranormal matters and conspiratorial matters, but he appears to have had some connection to the intelligence agencies. For example, he was one of the tramps in Dealey Plaza on the 22nd of November 1963 when Kennedy got shot. It was weird how he happened to be there. And what happened was the whole area around Maury Island and the nearby town were basically invaded by people who could be described as the Men in Black. The title of this particular episode is Men in Black, and of course Fixer is one of these Men in Black. And what Fixer claims is this artifact that he got Hynek to recover for him was this a part of the craft that crashed into the sea off Maury Island. What's interesting is that you see, Fixer claims he had a plan after the Washington invasion that Hynek was to go forward and announce that this was a real alien invasion. The Washington invasion happened in July. It was several actual separate days, but basically in July of 1952 there was a huge number of craft seen in the sky above Washington DC, and indeed lots of radar. Radar picked up a lot of objects. One of the people investigating that, strange enough, was called Nick Pope. Not the Nick Pope, he wasn't born then. He's not that old. But it just struck me as odd that this guy's got the same name. And so what Fixer wanted is he wanted Hynek to just say these were real aliens. Instead, Hynek said, oh no, they're just temperature inversions and things like that. The usual skeptic line. Which, of course, later on, is because Quinn gets very angry with him over that, because Quinn was actually sent up in a plane to deal with this, because of course he's in the US Air Force as well as Project Blue Book, and he's a pilot. So he's sent up to deal with these things, and then he gets very angry with Hynek for stating at the public inquiry, which is a temperature inversion. But then Hynek tells him the deal. Look, Mike, I had to say that because we're gonna do. Don't you see the whole thing about Project Blue Book is it's just to cover things up. But you and I, privately behind the scenes, we're going to use our reach with Project Blue Book to do our own research and our own publicity. Which of course is what Fixer wants as well, so why Fixer wants him out of the way, I'm not wanted just to get out of the way, I'm not sure. Now, what's interesting about this, of course, the Men in Black. Now, of course, these characters, Fixer and his colleagues, and there's about half a dozen of these guys, are considered to be the Men in Black, and they look the part of the Men in Black. They drive a black car, they wear black suits and trench coats, you know, black sun hats. They don't have the sunglasses, but they have everything else that makes them Men in Black. And of course, if you watch the less than high quality film franchise, you know, with Will Smith, it's a similar premise that this is basically a government agency. This is a secret black budget government department, and that the Men in Black are sort of a part of. They're humans. They're humans basically involved in secret intelligence. Now, from what I've gathered about the Men in Black, that this one theory, which is probably the more popular theory, is probably incorrect. Because encounters with Men in Black aren't like that. There's something different going on, I think, with the Men in Black. In fact, the research, I think, done by people like John Keel and Nick Redfern, I think, have proved a different hypothesis to explain them. They are in some way connected to the UFO phenomenon itself. They are actually not human. They are in some way paranormal or extraterrestrial beings. For instance, they seem to be able to appear and disappear at will. Their style of dress is actually, and the vehicles they drive are somewhat old-fashioned and sometimes very strange, which of course intelligence agents wouldn't do. Intelligence agents would blend in. They'd be more like Daniel Banks, this CIA guy. They'd be more like him. They'd be designed to blend in so no one would suspect them. The ostentatiousness of the Men in Black, their behaviour, their dress, their vehicles, would draw attention to them. They also appear to just appear and disappear at will. The cars they drive are old-fashioned. They tend to be sort of like big 1950s muscle cars and things like that. Even when they appear in the present day, they're driving these antiques. But they're not antiques. They look brand new. They look like they just came off the line yesterday. So, what's going on? I suspect the way they appear, they just seem to appear and harass UFO witnesses. The people who encounter them report being very frightened. The Men in Black themselves, and there's a few women in black. I mean, Nick Redfern has written a book called Women in Black, because a minority of them are feminine in appearance. They often have, they seem to be, they don't look quite human. They have very pale skin, for example. They often have, sometimes people report when they take their sunglasses off, they don't have human eyes. They have reptilian eyes or dark black eyes and things like that. They're not the black-eyed children. That's something different. But they often look like the black-eyed children because they have very deep black eyes. They sometimes act very strangely when they're in people's homes. For example, if a telephone rings, they'll stare at it in shock as if wondering what it is. They'll sometimes pick up knives and forks off the dining table and look at them curiously as if, what's that? Things like that. People like Jim Templeton, for example, who took the famous picture of his daughter where there's like this alien-like thing standing behind it. He actually reported encounters with Men in Black soon afterwards, and this was in May 1964, when long before the concept of Men in Black had entered the popular culture. So the real Men in Black, I think, are different to how they are portrayed in this series. Although that's not to say there are not direct real-life correlations with the kind of people who the Men in Black are in Project Blue Book. Absolutely not. Anyway, Hynek has essentially gone missing. He's been kidnapped by the Men in Black. Quinn and Mimi immediately try and find them, although Quinn sort of keeps Mimi at the Project Blue Book office for her own safety and her son's, well, Joel. But it's a good idea, actually, that he did, because Mimi becomes invaluable as a result. But then he goes and sees Dan, the CIA man. and he asks for his help. And then he finds out that when we are told by Dan a little bit about who Fixer is. Because the CIA man, as soon as Quinn says what's happened and explains this kind of character, Dan says, I thought it might be him. It turns out that Fixer's real name is William, and he is a psychic from the remote viewing program. He entered the project before Dan got there. This is the remote viewing program is described in episode 4, which is Dan says is a part of MK Ultra, but is in fact not. It's actually MK Ultra and this remote viewing both existed in real life, but they were not connected. They're organisationally, at least not on the surface. And it turns out that Fixer became kind of a renegade within the community, within this project, as David Icke would call him, and he decided he wanted to have disclosure. And indeed, he talks a little bit about his experiences later on, he basically he escapes. He escapes from the program and just becomes this person who's actually not within the government. He actually is a former psychic within the remote viewing, who kind of goes freelance on his own, like so many of these people do within this project. It's odd because it looks like signs like Susie the Russian is going freelance. Of course, we know that already at the end of episode 10 of season 1, Quinn and Hynek are kind of like working. They've only got one foot in Project Blue Book now. They're doing things independently, and it seems that Fixer is similar. Anyway, Mimi is not. She's not cooling her heels in the office. She persuades the secretary, this Faye, the secretary of Project Blue Book, to allow her. Faye sort of like does a Kakani and gives her son a tour of the base, which gives Mimi a chance to pour through the classified records of Project Blue Book. At the same time, we have Fixer and Hynek go to confront Dahl. Now, his name's not Dahl. It was Mr. Reed, I think. Harold Dahl is his real life name. But like many of the characters in Project Blue Book, he's a real person who is fictionalised and given a different name. But I'm going to call him Harold Dahl just for convenience. They confront Dahl, and Dahl then denies there was any boat. He claims it was an insurance claim, and of course that doesn't make sense, because he was told not to say anything by Fixer and the other men in black. However, because the men in black in this series are like a bunch of people running their own disclosure investigation project alongside the official government one. And then Dahl claims he made it up, but Fixer says, no, look, that's just what we told you to tell the Air Force. And Fixer ends up, it all gets very confusing because Fixer threatens Dahl with a gun. Oh yes, he's turning into a nasty character as old Fixer. Thought he was such a nice guy, didn't you? In the meantime, Dan takes Quinn to the psychic lab and gets Rebecca the psychic to draw some pictures. And what she does is she goes into a trance, this Rebecca, and she scribbles furiously on paper with a pencil and makes these strange fuzzy images. And they don't make any sense as a whole series of pictures, but Quinn says hold them up to the light, and he holds them up to the light, put them on top of each other, and all of them form a little bit of the artefact. And it's the alien artefact from season 1. Mimi finds the 4 Maury Island files as well, which is interesting. Now, it kind of confirms for the viewer that the Maury Island was a real UFO event, and that Dahl, of course, Dahl is just like, he just doesn't want to get shot, so he's saying things. And the fake confession, I've been through that, the conveniently told confession story. The skeptics, they love these things, but they're often faked as well. I mean, a confession is a claim too, and I go into that in more detail in my skeptic videos. I should bring up, incidentally, a point that I've been thinking about since the Area 51 episode 3. Many people might accuse the producers of Project Blue Book of political correctness for bringing Dan, the CIA man, into it because he's black. But just having a black character doesn't automatically mean political correctness. I actually didn't detect any political correctness as a result of this. And you know I've got a razor sharp eye for things like this. I detected no political correctness at all with Dan. Dan is a character who emerges quite naturally into the story in his current form as a black guy. It's not really played on very much. I mean, there's a couple of little scenes where, like in the police station, like the policeman ignores him until Quinn comes up and says, "Oh, sheriff," you know. It's occasionally referred to. You get like the white guilt thing once or twice. I think that's the only occasion I can actually think of so far. But I would say that this is not political correctness. I really wouldn't. I call these things out whenever I see them, and I can't see it. I think Dan is a good character. He fits in. He emerges naturally in the course of the narrative, and he's fitted into it quite well as himself. And I don't feel I'm being preached to. I don't feel I'm being given a white guilt trip and being, you know. I don't believe there's some kind of left-wing agenda behind Project Blue Book. I mean, you get it in so many things now that I know these things when I see it, and I don't see it in Project Blue Book. I really don't. Yeah. Yeah, Dan's a good character. I'm glad he's still in it. I think he's a good addition to the story. Now we find out a bit more about William's background. This is Mr. Fixer's real name, William. He says that he suffered an awful lot with his remote viewing because he was actually remote viewing bomb attacks. Now this is interesting because this means that in the story, the remote viewing program predates the real one in real life, at least the one we know about, which sort of began in the Cold War. It sort of began I think in the early 70s, I think with Geller and Swan, like I was saying in the previous episode. But according to this, it happened earlier. I mean, we know, like for example, in World War II, the Germans had Sylvia or Teach. We know also that the Allies had an awareness of psychic spying because they came down so hard on Helen Duncan. I've done entire videos about that. It's a big long subject. But Fixer is suffering very much. He starts crying as he's telling Hynek this, but he actually witnessed through remote viewing a bombing by Americans, presumably on a Japanese target or a German target. And he reports how he saw this little girl brushing her mother's hair. This is a very poignant scene. And he says, "Oh, don't attack that place. There's just little kids there, and don't drop a bomb there." But of course, then the bomb is dropped, and these people all die. And through his remote viewing, Fixer witnesses this. That's the dark side, I think, of having these abilities. If you think about it, some people say, "Oh, I wish I could do remote viewing. It'd be very useful." Yeah, it'd be useful, but it'd also be very, very painful. You'd experience a lot of bad things. Anyway, what happens is Hynek helps Dahl escape, which is just as well, as you'll find out later on. But Fixer and the Men in Black take the boat out, Dahl's boat out, to try and find the debris from this craft, and they do actually bring something up. It looks like these glowing lumps of rock. But the boat almost capsizes. One of the divers is killed. There's two divers from the Men in Black, and but they do manage to get this up. Now, Dan then explains. Dan and Quinn have a conversation, which is very interesting because Dan explains how he got into the CIA, because he was originally in training for the U.S. Marine Corps, and his commandant or commanding officer was very keen on betting. He used to bet on the baseball, and he suddenly realised that well, Dan kept giving him tips, and these tips kept coming in, and he won a lot of money. And he suddenly realised that Dan had an ability, what we would call a psychic ability, and so he recommended Dan for the forerunner of the CIA. This was in World War II. Then Quinn says something very interesting, because Dan then says, "Come on then, Quinn, tell me your story." And Quinn says, "What do you do? How did you get into Project Blue Book?" And Quinn says this: "Project Blue Book is vital." This is not verbatim, I'm just paraphrasing. "Project Blue Book is vital for protecting the country, for the survival of America. The Russians want the American people to panic as a result of the UFO phenomenon. We at Project Blue Book keep them calm." Now that's the party line, isn't it? That is the exact party line. That's what he first... This is basically what Harding and Valentine told Quinn. And when Quinn recruits Hynek to the project, he says, we're going to tell the we're just going to tell them the truth, that they don't exist. We're going to... What was it? We're going to write reports and close cases. That's what Harding says. I need you to write reports and close cases. So Quinn has just given Dan the party line, which indicates there's something going on in the realms of maybe this rift between the Air Force and the CIA that was hinted at in the last 2 episodes. And Quinn is guarding. Quinn, of course, has this different, a very, very different project going on privately with Hynek. The two of them are operating freelance and not telling Project Blue Book. He's just given Dan the party line, so he doesn't trust Dan completely. I think he does at the end of the preview, because Dan, of course, ever since he appeared, Dan, the CIA man, it's been clear that he is actually an ally of theirs, and he says things like, look, if you want any help, just let me know, just give me a call. So so then he says, well, Dan says, are UFOs a threat? And he says there's no reason to fear what we don't understand. Again, that's actually kind of like the line from the Robson panel, things like that. But however, the story goes on. Now Hynek and the Men in Black get back to shore, and Hynek then turns skeptic, and he starts saying that the stones that were on the seabed are just like volcanic rocks. They're not actually extra parts of an extraterrestrial spacecraft. And the Man in Black who's the diver, that's Fixer. There's only 2 of them left now. The others have gone. One of them died as a diver. He says, no, I saw it down there. I saw this craft. And Hynek says, you were suffering from hypoxia. You were just suffering from hypoxia. That is a lack of oxygen to the brain, and you had a hallucination. And this ties in with what we were talking about with Gremlins. In the last episode of these Gremlins. But the diver goes nuts at Hynek and starts attacking him. And Hynek says, you shouldn't have left that man down there. And he says, he died, he knew the risks and things like this. And Fixer gets his gun out. You know, Fixer's, like say, turning into a bit tricky. He's become a bit trigger happy in this season 2 so far. But Hynek says something. I'm sure there's a rational explanation here. Now, you know what I'm going to say, don't you? If you're a regular viewer, you know what I'm going to say. That phrase rational explanation always grates in me. It does. I mean, I know what it means. I know what people mean by this. It's a habit word of Steve Mehrer's, actually, and I always pull him up on it whenever he does it. There's no such thing as a rational explanation. There is only a rational method. In a sense, the rational explanation is a skeptic buzzword that they often use. And I go into more, just watch my skeptic video, I go into this in more detail, but to say there's a rational explanation is kind of like, it's a loaded term, it's misleading. Only methods can be rational. Conclusions, you know, if you have a conclusion and it's UFOs, it's aliens, but you arrived at it through a rational method, then it's a rational conclusion. If you say, oh no, an invisible pink unicorn told me it's a weather balloon, that's irrational, that's an irrational explanation. Do you see what I mean? Watch my skeptic video, there's more details in that. No, I'm not putting a link in the description box, find it for yourself. So, anyway, Dan and Quinn turn up at the police station, and Dahl is there. And the funny thing is, I mean, luckily he reports that Hynek let him free, because Quinn and Dan are both starting to suspect that Hynek has been recruited by the Men in Black, so he's now a part of Fixer's group. He wasn't kidnapped, he was recruited, which would mean he's like an opponent. But Dahl then says, Hynek helped me escape, so that means that they can still trust Hynek. So so basically Dan and Quinn go off to try and find Hynek. In fact, Hynek left them a message in the boat where they land. Right, he leaves a little notebook, and Quinn finds it, and it says, we've gone to the nearest airstrip, which is where the Men in Black's plane is. Now, funny thing is, the police talk openly about the Men in Black. They say, oh, Sheriff, some Men in Black have been spotted nearby. And this would fit because, of course, the Men in Black were a big part of local culture, and this happened in real life. Because the people in the area of Maury Island remembered them turning up to try and put a lid on the whole Maury Island incident. This is what Chrisman writes about. And of course, that would have happened. You know, this would be a part of local mythology and local history. So the men in black are going to get on board the plane with the rocks, these rocks they've dug up, and they're going to go to Antarctica for some reason, which we don't know about. And they want Hynek to come with them, and Hynek doesn't want to. And Hynek's saying, you know, look, that might cause the plane to crash, because the plane crashing the original, carrying the original alien artifact, that crashed. That was a US Air Force plane. And then, but first of all, Fixer taunts him and saying, hang on, you said these were just volcanic rocks. Are you changing your mind now, Alan? But then he confesses that he arranged the crashing of that plane. He actually sabotaged the plane. And Hynek is furious at Fixer for killing these innocent airmen who were carrying this artifact in the plane. So just basically so that the artifact didn't just disappear like the Roswell wreckage did. And the Fixer arranged that. Now, I find it very interesting, incidentally, that Fixer, like, you see this other side of Fixer. He is ruthless. Fixer is in the pursuit of disclosure. He really does think that the ends justifies the means, and he has a totally ruthless streak to him. Reminds you of like Blake and Blake 7. He was this freedom fighter, but he's willing to torture people. He's willing to, you know, oh, it's a long story. I could do a whole video on that. So anyway, Fixer, then Quinn and Dan turn up and they try and rescue Hynek. There's a shootout. Fixer escapes in the plane, but then Quinn shoots the plane and manages to puncture the fuel tank. And he says, look, there's fuel dripping on the runway. That plane's not going far. That plane is going to crash soon because he's running out of fuel. And so he's not going to get to Antarctica in that. Then well, in fact, then they go back to the office and they find out that the plane indeed did crash, but there's no body, no sign of Fixer. So we assume Fixer's now escaped with the artifact from when the plane comes down, and God knows where he could be now. He's a resourceful chap, isn't he? So seems to appear and disappear at will. And funny thing is, then Dan essentially is formally recruited to the little cabal, which currently includes Quinn and Hynek. So Quinn and Hynek are like running their own like private investigation and disclosure project. Dan is now a part of that. He's a CIA guy he's now part of this Air Force thing, which is odd because, like, of course, the CIA and Air Force are rivals. So again, he's doing this secretly behind the backs of his own superiors. And at the end of it all, we not only find out through Mimi that the Maury Island incident was a real UFO, because she's been pouring through these classified files while she's been waiting for her husband to come back. Yes, I told you Mimi is not no fool. She's playing a much bigger role now than she did before. But then suddenly Valentine and Harding walk in, and they say basically, and they start bringing in lots of documents, lots of legal documents, and they say basically Project Blue Book is in trouble because the Robertson panel is convening. Now the Robertson panel is something real. Now again, we're getting things mixed up a bit because we've gone from 1955 and the Kelly Hopkinsville case. Now we've gone back to January of 1953, so we're hopping all over the place in terms of time. So again, these are one of these anachronisms that are common in this series. It is fictional after all, and with fiction you can dally around with facts a little bit, which is why I like it so much. It's a lot more freeing than just reporting facts. But the Robertson panel was basically an investigation into the evidence gathered by Project Blue Book so far in the beginning of 1953. It's basically Hynek was one of the people called to testify at this panel. He was never formally a member, but he was an expert witness in real life. We're talking about here. And the conclusions they made are very interesting. Firstly, it's the first time the term UFO first appeared. That's the first time it was mentioned. And also, the conclusions they came up with have become a mantra for the official line ever since. And you see it in other things such as Project Condign, which is almost like a British equivalent of that. And that is, UFOs there's no evidence they're extraterrestrial or under intelligent control. There's no evidence they're a direct threat to national security. There is evidence that some are unexplained. Therefore, they recommend a program of public education to reduce mass hysteria. Again, this idea that people will panic and the Russians like that. Secondly, to monitor private civilian UFO groups. Again, this happened with Project Condign. If you ever read my written report on the HPANWO blog about the 2011 Bufora conference, Bufora, the British UFO Research Association, was essentially it was infiltrated by some people who definitely were MI5. And that is kind of like that's where the program, that's where this particular episode ends, but it ends on this beginnings of the Robertson panel. I might get some of my things mixed up because there was something called the Condon Report as well. I think the Condon Report came later. I think I was in the 60s. Oh, I can't look these things up right now. But I know that this is basically the official line was gathered at that point, and it ties in with some earlier things such as the Twining memo, where General Nathan Twining, Admiral Hillencutter, first head of the CIA, said there should be official ridicule and denial of UFOs. The Robertson panel puts it in a bit more of an Orwellian way by saying there should be a program of public education. But basically, of course, this means, I mean, this has been taken apart by ufologists over the decades since. We know that this involves disinformation, because there is a real phenomenon. What's more, it is a threat to national security. Anything that can hover over a nuclear base and deactivate missiles, or fire beams of light into weapon storage areas, you cannot say that's not a threat to national security, whatever it is. It seems to be impervious to our weapons and our electronic defences. It's something very technology high. We see this in recent years actually with the Tic Tac footage and TTSA and ATIP and things like that. Yes, this is a national security issue. You cannot deny that. So the fact that the Robertson panel concluded what it did, and indeed Project Condign and these other things, these are essentially cover-ups. These are whitewashes, just like Project Blue Book is, or was. So I'm interested to see what happens next. I'm on a roll here, so maybe I've got plans for other different videos, but I'm still going to do like I still want to review as many of these episodes as possible. I want to get, because I'm curious. I mean, loving this series. It's a brilliant series. As I said, it includes massive exopolitical themes that you don't see anywhere else. You don't see these in the original Project UFO TV series from the 70s. You don't see this in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. You don't see this anywhere else. Project Blue Book is the closest thing it is, I think, is the X-Files. It's very like the X-Files, but it's more closely based on reality. Fascinating series, absolutely brilliant. I'm loving it. I think it could do a lot of good, and I'll say that probably in reviews of later episodes. So, thank you everyone for watching HPANWO TV. Another video coming soon, although I am going back to work on Tuesday, but I'll probably make another one between now and then. Hospital Reporters, Pride and Dignity, stop the New World Order.